My name is Helena, I'm 32 years old, and I've always considered myself a discreet person. I was never the type to meddle in other people's lives or snoop on the neighbors. But what happened 3 months ago completely changed my perspective on privacy, secrets, and even my own courage. It all started when I moved into a compact apartment in the city center. It was an old building, with thin walls and an architecture that definitely wasn't designed with sound insulation in mind. I had just left a turbulent relationship and was eager to start my life over in a new place, far from painful memories. The apartment next to mine was occupied by what seemed like the perfect couple, Daniel and Mariana. They looked like they had stepped out of a margarine commercial, always smiling, polite, with that aura of marital bliss that makes any single person sigh. I would see them occasionally in the elevator or hallway, and they always greeted me with genuine kindness. I never imagined that in just a few weeks I would be involved in one of the most disturbing secrets I've ever witnessed. And it all began with a simple conversation I overheard through the wall of my bedroom on a sleepless night that would change everything. Chapter 1. The First Strange Night. It was a rainy Tuesday in March when it all began. I was lying in bed trying to sleep after an exhausting day at work when I heard voices coming from the apartment next door. At first, I didn't pay much attention. After all, couples talk, sometimes argue. It's normal. But there was something different about that night. Daniel's voice was low, almost an urgent whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the tone was unmistakable. He was nervous, maybe even scared. This intrigued me because Daniel always seemed like an extremely controlled and confident man. He was a lawyer, always well-dressed, with that impeccable posture of someone accustomed to solving problems. Instinctively, I approached the wall that separated our bedrooms. I know I shouldn't have done that it was an invasion of privacy. But curiosity got the better of me. And then I heard clearly, "You can't keep doing this. If Mariana finds out, it'll be the end of everything." My heart raced. Was there someone else in the apartment? But the voice that responded wasn't Mariana's. I already knew her pleasant, melodic voice. This one was different, rougher, with a slightly sensual tone that made me shiver. "You always say that, but you never have the courage to make a real decision," the unknown female voice replied, with a mix of irritation and sadness. "How long have we been in this situation? 2 years? And you keep promising me you'll sort things out." 2 years? My God. I had just moved in, but clearly this situation had been going on long before. Was Daniel having an affair? And worse, was she there, in the apartment, probably while Mariana was out? "It's not that simple, Laura," Daniel replied, and now his voice carried a mix of exasperation and affection that made me uncomfortable. "You know I love you, but the situation is complicated. Mariana's family, my office, our public image. I can't just throw everything away." "Laura." So the mistress had a name, and apparently she wasn't just a casual fling. There were feelings involved. Unfulfilled promises, a relationship that had been dragging on for years. This made everything much more complex and, in a way, more tragic. I continued listening, my ear practically pressed against the wall, my heart beating so hard I feared they could hear it from the other side. The conversation dragged on for a few more minutes, with Daniel trying to calm Laura, promising that he'd find a solution soon, that he just needed a little more time. "You always need more time," Laura replied, and this time her voice was choked. "I'm tired of being the second choice, of hiding like I'm some dirty secret. I deserve more than this, Daniel, and you know it." There was a heavy silence, followed by the sound of footsteps and a door closing softly. Then, total silence. I lay back down in bed, my mind spinning at high speed. What had I just discovered? And more importantly, what should I do with this information? I spent the rest of the night awake, thinking about Mariana. She was so kind, always greeting with a genuine smile. What would it be like to live with someone who had been maintaining a parallel relationship for 2 years? Did she suspect anything? Or did she live completely oblivious to the betrayal happening literally inside her own home? I decided it wasn't my responsibility to interfere. I didn't really know these people. I didn't know the complexities of their relationship. Maybe it was better to pretend nothing had happened and go on with my life. But deep down, I knew that discovery had created a crack in my perception of normalcy, and things would never be the same.
In the days following that first revealing night, I began paying more attention to Daniel and Mariana. Not obsessively, but with a heightened awareness that hadn't existed before. It was as if I had put on special glasses that allowed me to see beyond appearances. On Thursday, I ran into Mariana in the elevator, and she was carrying grocery bags and wearing a floral dress that made her look even younger than she actually was. I estimated she was around 30. I offered to help her with the shopping, and she accepted gratefully. "You're so kind, Helena," she said as we walked down the hallway. "You know, Daniel always comments on how nice it is to have such a friendly and polite neighbor. We were used to the previous tenant who was, well, difficult." The mention of Daniel made me choke slightly, but I disguised it with a cough. "Really? In what way?" "Oh, he threw parties at inappropriate hours, had strange visitors at any time in the early morning," Mariana explained, opening the apartment door. "With you, it's different. It's like no one even lives next door. You're so quiet." Quiet. The irony wasn't lost on me. If only she knew that I had overheard things that definitely weren't meant for my ears. I felt a pang of guilt as I helped her put the groceries in the kitchen. Their apartment was beautifully decorated, with modern furniture and refined tastes that obviously required significant investment. There were photos of the couple everywhere, on the beach, on trips to Europe, at family parties. In all of them, they looked genuinely happy, in love, connected. How did Daniel manage to maintain that facade while sustaining an intense parallel relationship? "Want some coffee?" Mariana offered, interrupting my thoughts. "I just bought some delicious cookies too." I should have refused. I should have made up any excuse and left immediately. But there was something about Mariana, a barely perceptible vulnerability behind the perfect smile, that made me accept. Maybe I wanted to understand this woman who was being cheated on without knowing it better. We sat at the kitchen table and Mariana began talking about her life with surprising openness for someone I barely knew. I learned that she worked as an interior designer, which explained the impeccable decoration, and that she had been married to Daniel for 5 years, after a 3-year courtship. "He's my best friend," she said with a nostalgic smile as she stirred her coffee. "You know when you find that person who just gets you? Who's always there, who supports you in everything, that's Daniel for me." Each word was like a stab. How could she talk about him like that, with so much admiration and love while he kept Laura hidden? And Laura, 2 years of a parallel relationship wasn't a passing affair. It was a complete second life. "Do you guys think about having kids?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation in safe territory. Mariana's face clouded slightly, a shadow passing over her eyes. "Yes, but it's been complicated. Daniel's been really stressed with work, always saying it's not the right time. Sometimes I feel like he's avoiding me, you know? Like there's something on his mind he can't share." My God. She was starting to notice. Maybe unconsciously, maybe in a way too subtle for her to fully recognize, but Mariana felt something was wrong. Women's intuition is a powerful force, even when we try to ignore it. "Relationships have ups and downs," I replied diplomatically, hating every word coming out of my mouth. "Maybe it's really just a phase of stress." Mariana nodded, but she didn't seem convinced. We talked for another 20 minutes about trivialities, work, hobbies, shows we were watching. But that confession about feeling Daniel distant echoed in my head long after I returned to my apartment. That night, I stayed up thinking about the moral dilemma I was involved in. Mariana was a genuinely good person who didn't deserve to be deceived. But did I have the right to destroy her world based on conversations I had accidentally overheard through the wall? What if I was misinterpreting everything? But then, around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. Low voices, urgent whispers, and this time other sounds that made me blush and cover my ears with the pillow. Laura was there again. And Daniel was doing something absolutely unthinkable, betraying his wife inside his own home, trusting that the thin walls and Mariana's naivety would protect him. At that moment, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I couldn't just ignore what was happening. Somehow I needed to discover more about this situation before deciding my next step. After that second night listening to conversations I shouldn't have, I developed what I can only describe as a cautious obsession. It wasn't voyeurism, or at least that's what I told myself. It was more a need to understand the full dimension of what was happening before making any decision on how to proceed. I started paying attention to patterns. Laura showed up every Tuesday and Thursday, invariably after 11 at night. Mariana, I discovered through casual elevator conversations, had Pilates classes exactly on those days, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., followed by dinners with her design course friends. She usually returned only around midnight or a little later. Daniel had created a perfect window of opportunity, and the fact that it was so methodical, so calculated, made it even more disturbing. These weren't impulsive encounters driven by uncontrollable passion. They were scheduled, routine, part of a carefully orchestrated double life. On a Tuesday, I decided to do something that to this day makes me question my own ethics. I pretended I was going down to throw out the trash exactly at 11:15 p.m., the time Laura usually arrived. My heart was pounding as I waited in the hallway, pretending to rummage in my bag as if looking for something. And then she appeared, stepping out of the elevator with a confidence that surprised me. Laura was everything Mariana wasn't. Dark, straight hair cut in a modern, bold style, tight and sophisticated clothes, an aura of sensuality that was impossible to ignore. She didn't try to be discreet. She walked down the hallway as if she had every right to be there. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. Her eyes were green and piercing, and for a frightening moment I had the impression that she knew exactly who I was and what I was doing there. But then she simply nodded slightly, a polite but distant greeting, and knocked on Daniel's door. He answered quickly, almost as if he had been waiting on the other side. I couldn't see his face from there, but I heard the affectionate tone in his voice when he said, "You took your time," followed by the sound of the door closing softly. I stood there for a moment, processing what I had just witnessed. Laura didn't seem like a victim or a desperate woman clinging to scraps of attention. She seemed comfortable, as if this was her normal routine, her legitimate right. In the following days, I began my own parallel investigation. In an era of social media, it's not hard to find information about people, especially when you have a name and a physical description. It took 3 days of obsessive searching, but I finally found Laura's Instagram profile. Laura Mendez, 29 years old, architect. Her profile was semi-private, and what I saw there left me even more confused. She seemed to have a full and independent life, photos with friends at fancy restaurants, trips around Brazil, impressive architectural projects. There was no photo with Daniel, obviously, but there was something in her captions, certain melancholic phrases about love that can't be shouted and waiting for someone worth it that clearly referred to him. The most disturbing part? In some photos, Laura was wearing what looked like expensive jewelry, a pearl necklace, diamond earrings, a white gold bracelet. Gifts from Daniel? Probably. He wasn't just keeping a mistress, he was sustaining a full relationship with all the emotional and financial trappings that entailed. Digging deeper, and yes, at this point I was fully aware that I had crossed all reasonable lines of privacy, I found Laura's professional profile on LinkedIn. Architect graduated from the same university where Daniel had studied law. They had known each other for a long time, probably since college days. This changed everything. Laura wasn't a recent fling or a sudden passion. She was part of Daniel's history from before Mariana, possibly a girlfriend from his youth whom he never fully got over. Or maybe they had reconnected later, rekindling an old flame that Daniel never had the courage to completely extinguish. The more I discovered, the more complex the situation revealed itself to be. It wasn't simply a case of an unfaithful man and an innocent wife. It was a love triangle with deep roots, where each person was trapped in their own form of suffering. Mariana in ignorance, Laura in waiting, and Daniel in lies. On that Thursday, when I heard Laura through the wall again, her voice was different. There was a new urgency, almost desperation. "Daniel, I can't continue like this. I'm wasting the best years of my life waiting for you. I received a job offer in Portugal, an incredible opportunity. But I can't make the decision because you're always asking for more time." Portugal. Laura was considering leaving the country, and Daniel, his response was a silence too long, followed by a, "You can't do this to me," that sounded more selfish than romantic. It was at that moment that I realized I was no longer just observing a situation. I was witnessing a crossroads in the lives of three people, a point of no return approaching rapidly. And whether I wanted it or not, my presence, even if involuntary as a silent witness, placed me in the middle of this story. The question was, what exactly did I intend to do with this knowledge? It was Mariana who invited me to dinner. On a Friday when we met at the building's entrance, she casually mentioned that she was planning a dinner on Saturday and would love if I could attend. "Just a few close friends," she explained with that warm smile that was starting to cause me physical pain. "Daniel's been so stressed lately that I thought I'd do something special to cheer him up." Every fiber of my being screamed to refuse. The last thing I needed was to sit at the table with that couple, pretending normalcy while carrying the weight of the secrets I knew. But there was something in Mariana's expression, a vulnerability, perhaps even disguised loneliness, that made me accept against my better judgment. On Saturday night at 8 p.m., I rang the doorbell of the apartment next door wearing a simple but elegant dress, carrying a bottle of wine I had bought at a local winery. Mariana answered radiant, wearing a blue dress that highlighted her light eyes, and led me inside. The living room was decorated with candles and floral arrangements, soft music playing in the background. There were three other couples already present, longtime friends of Daniel and Mariana, as I later discovered. They all seemed comfortable with each other, with that intimacy that comes from years of shared friendship. And then Daniel appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of appetizers. Our eyes met, and for a second I saw something cross his expression: surprise, apprehension. But he quickly composed himself, approaching with an outstretched hand and that charming smile of a successful lawyer. "Helena, what a pleasure to finally get to know you better," he said, his voice controlled and friendly. "Mariana talks about you a lot. She said you've been a wonderful neighbor." We shook hands, and in that brief physical contact, I felt something disturbing. There was no guilt in his eyes, no discomfort at being there representing the perfect husband while keeping a hidden mistress. There was only confidence, the security of someone accustomed to controlling narratives and situations. The dinner started pleasantly. The food was delicious. Mariana was an excellent cook, and the conversation flowed easily among the guests. We talked about politics, TV shows, travel plans, the usual dinner conversations among educated adults, but I couldn't fully concentrate. My gaze kept returning to Daniel and Mariana, observing their interactions with almost forensic attention, and what I saw was disconcerting. Daniel was attentive to Mariana. He touched her hand occasionally, finished her sentences, laughed at her jokes. It didn't seem forced or fake, it seemed genuine. How could someone be so affectionate with his wife while maintaining an intense parallel relationship? Was it psychopathy? Extreme compartmentalization? Or was it possible that Daniel really loved both women, trapped in an impossible situation of his own creation? "Helena?" Mariana's voice brought me back. "Are you okay? You seem distant." "Oh, sorry," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "I was just thinking about how beautiful it is to see such a connected couple. You two have something special." It was Mariana who blushed, squeezing Daniel's hand on the table. But it was in Daniel that I noticed something more interesting. For a fraction of a second, I saw guilt cross his expression. So he really was aware of what he was doing. He wasn't a sociopath without feelings. He was someone who consciously chose to live in the lie. The conversation eventually veered into relationships, as it often does when adults drink enough wine. One of the couples present, Marcos and Julia, mentioned that they had almost separated 2 years ago because of a crisis they were going through. "What saved you?" one of the women, Carolina, asked with genuine curiosity. "Honesty," Julia replied without hesitation. "I know it sounds cliché, but it was when we finally started being brutally honest with each other about our fears, insecurities, even temptations, that we truly reconnected." The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at Daniel and saw his jaw clench almost imperceptibly. Mariana, unaware of the tension, agreed enthusiastically. "It's true," she said, her voice full of conviction. "I've always told Daniel that no matter what happens, I'd rather know the truth, even if it hurts, than live in a lie. Trust is the foundation of everything, isn't it?" There it was. I had reached my limit. The hypocrisy of that scene, Daniel nodding in agreement while his mistress was probably at home waiting for a call, Mariana defending honesty while being systematically deceived, all of us sitting there pretending normalcy, was too much to bear. "Excuse me," I murmured, standing up abruptly. I need to use the bathroom." Mariana pointed down the hallway, and I practically ran away from that table. I locked myself in the bathroom and leaned on the sink, breathing deeply, trying to compose myself. What was I doing there? Why had I accepted this invitation? That's when I heard it. Through the small bathroom window that opened to the building's ventilation shaft, an unmistakable sound reached me, the ring of a cell phone. And then Daniel's voice, low but clear, now inside the couple's bedroom. He must have taken advantage of my exit to step away too. "Laura, I said you can't call now. Yes, I know it's important, but I'm in the middle of a dinner. Tomorrow, I promise, we'll talk properly tomorrow. I love you too, but I need to hang up." My blood ran cold. He was there, in the bedroom he shared with Mariana, just a few meters from where his wife was entertaining guests, whispering declarations of love to his mistress. The audacity, the disrespect, the casual cruelty of it all made me nauseous. When I returned to the dining room, my eyes immediately sought out Daniel. He had already returned too and was serving more wine to the guests, his mask of perfect host firmly in place. But when his gaze met mine, something passed between us. He knew. He knew I had overheard something, that somehow I was aware of his secrets. The rest of the night was silent torture. I stayed only another hour before making up an excuse about an early commitment the next day. Mariana hugged me goodbye, thanking me for the company, making me promise we'd repeat the gathering soon. But it was Daniel who walked me to the door. "It was a pleasure, Helena," he said, his voice low enough for only me to hear. And then, holding the door as I left, he added, "You know, thin walls can be problematic in old buildings like this. You never know what we might accidentally hear." It wasn't an explicit threat, but the message was clear. Daniel knew that I knew, and he was warning me to keep my mouth shut. In the days following the dinner, I developed what I can only describe as paranoia. Every sound from the apartment next door made me jump. Every casual encounter with Daniel in the elevator or garage left me tense, waiting. For what? A direct threat? An attempt to buy my silence? Or maybe an honest conversation where he would explain the whole situation to me? None of that happened. Daniel continued greeting me politely when we crossed paths, always with that controlled smile that didn't reach his eyes. But there was a new vigilance in his posture, as if he were constantly calculating my next moves. What he didn't know was that I had made a decision. Not about whether I would tell Mariana, that question still tormented me daily, but about understanding the situation completely before making any move. And for that, I needed to talk to Laura. Finding a way to contact Laura without raising suspicions was more complicated than I imagined. I couldn't just message her on Instagram. How would I explain that I knew her? And I couldn't wait to casually run into her in the building without Daniel noticing. The solution came unexpectedly. Checking Laura's LinkedIn profile again, I discovered that she worked at an architecture firm in the city center, just 3 blocks from my job. In the photos she occasionally posted, I recognized a specific cafe where she seemed to lunch frequently. On a Thursday during my lunch break, I went there. My plan was vague. Maybe just observe her from afar, try to understand better who this woman was outside the context of nocturnal whispers through the wall. But fate, or bad luck, had other plans. Laura was sitting alone at a corner table, fiddling with her laptop while sipping coffee. She was wearing reading glasses that she didn't have in her Instagram photos, making her look more intellectual, less femme fatale. There was something vulnerable in her hunched posture, in the way she bit her lower lip while analyzing whatever was on the screen. Before I could reconsider, I found myself walking toward her. My heart was beating so hard I thought I would faint, but somehow I managed to keep my voice steady when I spoke. "Laura Mendez?" She looked up, surprised. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. We were just two women who had exchanged a polite nod in a dark hallway. But then I saw recognition flash in her green eyes, followed quickly by something that seemed like fear. "You're the neighbor," she said, not as a question but as a statement. Her voice had that same raspy quality I recognized from the conversations through the wall. "Helena." So Daniel had mentioned my name to her. They discussed more than I imagined, sharing details of their parallel lives. Somehow that made everything even more disturbing. "Can I sit?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Laura hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of her laptop. For a moment I thought she would refuse, maybe even stand up and leave. But then, to my surprise, she nodded and indicated the empty chair across from her. We sat in silence for a few seconds, each assessing the other. Up close, Laura was more beautiful than the photos suggested, but she also seemed more tired. There were bags under her eyes carefully disguised with makeup, and her hands trembled slightly as she closed the laptop. "You know," she said finally, her voice low but firm, "about me and Daniel." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "The walls are thin." A pained expression crossed Laura's face and she closed her eyes for a moment. "My God, how long have you known?" "A few weeks," I admitted. "Since I moved into the building. It wasn't intentional, I swear. The walls really are very thin and you hear everything," Laura finished, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "What an absurd situation. You must think I'm a monster." The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. I had imagined Laura as the villain of this story, the other woman, the homewrecker, the unscrupulous seductress. But the person sitting in front of me seemed as lost and hurt as Mariana would probably be when she discovered the truth. "I didn't come here to judge you," I said, and realized it was true. "I came because I need to understand. How did this start? How do you manage to live like this?" Laura was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing imaginary patterns on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was laden with contained emotion. "I met Daniel 10 years ago in college. We were young, in love, planning a future together. But then he met her family. Mariana's family." Laura paused, swallowing hard. "You need to understand. Daniel comes from a humble background. He struggled a lot to get into law school, worked during the day and studied at night. And then he met Mariana, daughter of one of the most influential partners at the firm where he was interning. The story began to make cruel sense. He chose his career over you," I stated. "It wasn't quite like that," Laura replied quickly, defensive. "Or maybe it was, I don't know anymore. He broke up with me saying he needed to focus on his career, that we were too young for serious commitments. 6 months later, he was engaged to Mariana. And I tried to move on. I had other relationships, built my career as an architect, traveled, lived my life. But then he came back," I said, starting to understand the pattern. Laura nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. 2 years ago, we ran into each other casually at a professional event. He was married. I was in a relationship that wasn't going anywhere. We started talking just as old friends at first, but then everything came back. That connection, that chemistry. He said he had made the biggest mistake of his life by letting me go, that he had never stopped loving me. "And you believed him," I said softly. "I wanted to believe," Laura corrected, her voice breaking. "And in a way, I still do. Because when we're together, when it's just the two of us, it's real. What we feel for each other is real. It's not just physical attraction or nostalgia from the past, it's genuine love. But he's married to another person, I pointed out, trying not to sound accusatory. A person who also loves him, who doesn't deserve this. You think I don't know that? Laura replied, her voice rising slightly before she controlled it. You think I don't hate myself every day for this? That I don't wake up in the middle of the night wondering what kind of person I've become? I never wanted to be the other woman. I never dreamed of hiding, of accepting crumbs, of celebrating birthdays alone, waiting for a message that sometimes doesn't even arrive. The desperation in her voice was palpable. This wasn't a calculating femme fatale destroying a marriage for fun. It was a woman trapped in a situation that was probably destroying her inside as much as it would destroy Mariana when the truth came out. So why do you continue? I asked. Why not end it, accept the job offer in Portugal and start your life over? Laura looked at me with an expression mixing pain and something that might have been hope or delusion. Because he promises he'll leave her. Not now, but soon. He says he's waiting for the right moment, that he doesn't want to hurt her unnecessarily, that he needs to organize things financially and professionally, and every time I'm ready to give up, he says something that makes me believe again, that makes me think maybe this time it's true. 2 years, I said, and it wasn't a question. 2 years you've waited for a right moment that never comes. The silence that followed was answer enough. Laura knew on some deep level that she was being deceived just as much as Mariana. The difference was that she had consciously chosen to enter this situation, while Mariana remained in ignorance. Are you going to tell her? Laura asked abruptly, her gaze meeting mine with intensity. Is that why you're here? To confront me before revealing everything? The question caught me off guard. Honestly, I didn't know the answer. I don't know what I'm going to do, I admitted. Part of me feels Mariana deserves to know the truth, but another part doesn't want to be responsible for destroying her life. It wouldn't be you destroying it, Laura said bitterly. It would be Daniel. You'd just be the messenger. But you know how it works, I replied. The messenger is always blamed too, and besides, I barely know Mariana. Who am I to decide she needs to know? Maybe she's happier in ignorance. Laura laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. No one is happier in ignorance. That's a lie we tell ourselves to justify our cowardice. She paused, then added more softly. If you're going to do something, do it soon. Because this situation, it can't continue like this forever. Something will break eventually, and the longer it goes on, the more painful the fall will be. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation had reached its natural limit. When I stood up to leave, Laura held my arm lightly. Helena, thank you for not judging me as harshly as I deserve. And whatever your decision, I hope you understand that I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be loved by the man I love. I left that cafe with more questions than answers. Laura wasn't the demon I had imagined, but she also wasn't innocent. Daniel was manipulating both women, feeding them promises and half-truths. And Mariana continued living in a fantasy world that was about to collapse. The only certainty I had was this. Laura was right. Something would have to break eventually. The question was whether I would be the catalyst for that rupture, or just another silent witness to an announced tragedy. The conversation with Laura left me in an emotional turmoil that lasted days. I returned home that Thursday, completely exhausted, as if I had run a marathon. Every revelation, every layer of complexity added to that situation, made it harder to see a clear path ahead. That night, for the first time since I had moved in, I couldn't hear the voices through the wall, not because they weren't there. It was Thursday after all, Laura's day. But because I had put on headphones with loud music, creating an intentional barrier between me and their secrets. I needed space to think, to process everything I had learned. I made a mental list trying to organize my thoughts rationally. Option 1, tell everything to Mariana. Pros. She would have the information needed to make decisions about her own life. She would have the chance to choose whether she wanted to stay in a marriage based on lies or start over. It was, objectively, the right thing to do. Cons. I would completely destroy her world. She would lose not only the husband she loved, but also the illusion of security and the future she had planned. Plus, how would Daniel react? He could publicly blame me, create problems for me in the building, make my life unbearable. Option 2. Tell Daniel that I know and give him an ultimatum. Pros. It would place the responsibility for revealing the truth where it really belongs, with him. It would give him the chance to do the right thing on his own. Cons. Men like Daniel, accustomed to manipulating narratives, rarely react well to ultimatums. He could simply become more careful, more discreet. Or worse, he could convince Mariana that I was some unbalanced person trying to cause problems in their relationship. Option 3. Do nothing. Pros. I would keep my life simple and drama-free. I wouldn't be responsible for the devastating emotional consequences that would surely come. I could argue that it wasn't my responsibility to fix other people's problems. Cons. My conscience. All the nights I would see Mariana in the elevator, knowing what I knew. Every superficial interaction where she would share her plans and future dreams with Daniel, and I would have to smile and agree, while knowing it was all built on lies. Option 4. Move out. Pros. I would completely escape the situation. What the eyes don't see. Cons. I had just moved, spent savings on deposit and furniture. Besides, running away wouldn't erase the knowledge I had. It wouldn't eliminate the guilt of not having done anything. No option was good. They all had significant consequences, and they all somehow placed me in the middle of a situation I never asked to be part of. Over the weekend, I tried to distract myself. I went to the movies alone, walked in the park, had lunch with a work friend who had no idea of the drama consuming me. But my mind kept returning to the apartment next door, to the 3 protagonists of that impossible love triangle. It was on Sunday night while preparing dinner that I heard the argument, and this time it wasn't through the wall but through my slightly open door. The voices came from the hallway. "You can't keep avoiding me." It was Mariana's voice, loud and laden with emotion in a way I had never heard before. "Weeks, Daniel. Weeks without touching me, without really looking at me. Something is wrong and you just refuse to admit it." "It's nothing, Mari." I said, "It's just work stress." Daniel's voice tried to calm, but there was a note of panic in it that I immediately recognized. "Don't treat me like an idiot," Mariana shouted, and I heard something break. A vase, a plate. I may be naive, but I'm not stupid. There's something you're not telling me, I can feel it. My heart raced. Something had changed. Mariana was starting to see through the facade. I approached the door, unable to resist the need to hear more. "You're imagining things," Daniel replied, but his voice sounded desperate now. "Mari, please, let's talk inside. Not in the hallway where the neighbors can hear." "Screw the neighbors," Mariana shouted. "Maybe they already know something I don't. Maybe everyone knows except me." There was a heavy silence, followed by the sound of sobs. When Mariana spoke again, her voice was broken. "There's someone else, isn't there? That's why you're so distant. That's why you avoid me." "Don't be ridiculous," Daniel said, but the denial sounded weak even to me. "Mari, I love you. You know that. I'm just going through a tough time at work and—" "Look me in the eyes," Mariana interrupted, her voice now controlled but cold. "Look me in the eyes and swear there's no one else." The silence that followed was deafening. I could barely breathe, waiting for Daniel's response. It was an opportunity for him to do the right thing, to finally be honest, to give Mariana the respect she deserved. "I swear," he said finally, and I could almost hear my heart breaking for Mariana. "There's no one. It's just you. Always has been." The lie was so brazen, so cruel in its ease, that it made me nauseous. I heard footsteps and quickly stepped away from the door, but not before seeing Mariana run toward the elevator, tears streaming down her face, while Daniel stood in the hallway, his expression a mix of relief and guilt. That scene decided for me. At that moment, watching Mariana flee in tears while Daniel maintained his lies, I realized that doing nothing was, in itself, a choice. A choice of complicity, of allowing that cruelty to continue. But before I could act, something unexpected happened. The next day, Monday, when I returned from work, I found an envelope at my door. There was no sender, just my name written in elegant handwriting that I recognized from Instagram captions. It was from Laura. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive paper. The days after Laura's letter were a nightmare. Every morning I'd wake up ready to do something, anything, but every night I'd just be paralyzed by fear. The apartment next door went silent. No more visits from Laura, no more late-night whispers. It felt like everyone was just holding their breath. Mariana, when I saw her, seemed broken. She wore sunglasses indoors, hiding eyes I knew were swollen from crying. And Daniel? He looked like a wreck. When we met in the elevator, he grabbed the door, and his voice was desperate. He asked if I was an understanding person, someone who knew life wasn't black and white. He was trying to justify himself, looking for my approval. I told him people always have choices, especially the hard ones. He just slumped and said, "I hope you're kind when you judge mine." He knew I knew everything, and instead of threatening me, he appealed to my empathy. It was smart, I'll give him that. The days after the confrontation were like living in a war zone. The apartment next door oscillated between icy silences and explosive arguments that could be heard throughout the floor. Mariana had decided not to make an immediate decision. Instead of kicking Daniel out or leaving herself, she chose the most painful path, continuing to live together while she figured out what to do. "I'm not going to let him get away easily," she confessed to me one Friday afternoon when she invited me over for coffee in her apartment. "If it's going to end, and it probably will, I want it to be on my terms and at the right time. I'm not going to let him dictate how this story ends." There was a new strength in Mariana, born from pain and anger. The sweet, naive woman I had known had been tempered by the fire of betrayal, emerging harder, more cautious, but also in a way more authentic. "Have you talked to her?" I asked. "To Laura?" Mariana took a long sip of coffee before answering. "She called me, the day after the confrontation. She said she'd been trying to call for days, but I had blocked the number when I saw it in the messages." She let out a humorless laugh. It was surreal. The other woman apologizing, saying she never meant to hurt me, that she was as trapped as I was in this situation. Part of me wanted to curse her, say horrible things. But you know what was most disturbing? "What?" I asked, completely absorbed. "I felt sorry for her," Mariana admitted, her voice laden with confusion. She cried on the phone, said she was leaving the country to try to forget Daniel and rebuild her life. Said she was weak, that she fell in love with the wrong man at the wrong time and didn't have the strength to leave when she should have. And I believed her. I believed she was suffering as much as I was. It was an unexpected twist. I had imagined a confrontation full of rage between the two women, accusations and counter-accusations. Not this reluctant empathy, this recognition that both were, in a sense, victims of Daniel's manipulations. "And Daniel?" I asked. "How is he handling all this?" Mariana's expression hardened. "Daniel is trying damage control. First he tried to minimize it. It was just physical. It meant nothing. I'm the love of his life. All those pathetic cliches unfaithful men use. When that didn't work, he tried to shift the blame elsewhere, to work stress, to pressure from our family. He even tried to suggest that I had been emotionally distant, that in a way I contributed to him seeking comfort elsewhere. He didn't do that," I said, horrified. "He did. And you know what's sadder? For a moment, a brief moment, I almost believed it. I almost started wondering what I had done wrong, how I could have prevented this, until I realized what he was doing, manipulating me, making me question my own reality. It's what he's always done, I realized. Throughout our entire relationship, he shaped narratives, controlled perceptions, made me doubt my own instincts when they screamed that something was wrong. Mariana's lucidity was impressive. She was seeing not just the betrayal, but deeper patterns of manipulation that probably existed for years. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" I asked softly. "I'm going to file for divorce," she said firmly. "But first, I'm going to make sure everything is properly documented. The messages, the evidence of infidelity, everything. My lawyer said it's important, especially since we have shared assets, and I contributed significantly to building our financial life. Daniel isn't going to just walk away from this situation as if nothing happened." There was something admirable in the way Mariana was handling the situation, not through impulsiveness or blind revenge, but with calculated strategy and determination. The pain was there, obviously. I saw it in her eyes, in the way her hands trembled slightly holding the coffee cup, but she wasn't letting the pain control her. "And you, Helena?" Mariana asked suddenly, catching me off guard. "How are you dealing with all this? I know you didn't choose to be involved, but you ended up in the middle of all this drama." It was a question I had been avoiding myself. How was I dealing? Poorly, honestly. I felt guilty for not saying anything sooner, though rationally I knew it wasn't my responsibility. I felt invasive for having overheard so many private conversations, even if it wasn't intentional. And strangely, I felt sad, not just for Mariana, but for everyone involved, including Laura and even on some level Daniel. "I'm processing," I admitted. "This has made me think a lot about honesty, relationships, the lies we tell ourselves and others. I didn't come out unscathed from this situation, even being just an observer." Mariana nodded with understanding. "No one comes out unscathed when the truth comes out, I think. It's like an earthquake. It shakes not just the epicenter, but everyone around it too." On the following Sunday, the 28th, 2 days before Laura's deadline in her letter, something unexpected happened. I was at the market buying groceries when I bumped into Daniel. He was alone in the wine aisle, holding an expensive bottle but not really looking at it, lost in thought. When he saw me, his eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I thought he would just turn and walk away. But instead he approached, his appearance even more deteriorated than the last time I saw him. His beard was unkempt for several days. There were stains on his once always impeccable shirt. "Helena," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Everything in me screamed to refuse, to walk away from the situation that had already caused enough pain. But there was something in his expression, total defeat, raw vulnerability, that made me hesitate. "5 minutes," I said. We went to a nearby cafe and sat at a corner table. Daniel ordered a double espresso but didn't touch it when it arrived, just stared at the cup as if it could contain answers to his problems. "I know you hate me," he began, "and you have every right. But I need someone to understand. I need to say this to someone who knows the whole story." "I don't hate you, Daniel," I said, and realized it was true. "But I don't approve of your choices. And I definitely don't think you deserve absolution or compassion after what you did." He nodded, accepting the judgment. "I never planned for it to be like this. I loved Mariana when I married her. I still love her, in a way. But Laura..." He paused, running his hands over his face. "Laura was the love of my youth, the person who understood me when I was nobody, when I was still struggling to become someone. And when we reconnected, all of that came back with a force I wasn't prepared to resist." "So you chose not to resist," I said bluntly. "And you chose to lie instead of being honest." "I was a coward," Daniel admitted, his voice breaking. "Too cowardly to leave the security that Mariana represented, too cowardly to let go of the passion that Laura offered. So I tried to have both, convincing myself that I was protecting everyone by keeping the secret. But I was just protecting myself." It was the first time Daniel openly admitted his cowardice. There were no justifications, no attempts to manipulate the narrative. It was just a man acknowledging the size of the hole he had dug for himself and the people around him. "What do you want from me, Daniel?" I asked, tired. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because you were the witness," he replied, looking me in the eyes for the first time. You heard everything through the walls. You know the secrets. You've seen both sides. You understand the complexity in a way no one else can. And I need someone to know that I'm not just a monster, that I made terrible choices, but there's a human being here who hates himself for it. You want validation? I said, understanding. You want me to say you're not entirely bad, that there are nuances to your story. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe I just need to say out loud how much I've messed everything up. I lost Mariana, I lost Laura, I lost respect for myself. And the worst part is that no one forced me into this. It was my choices, all of them. And now I have to live with the consequences. There was a long silence. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction seeing Daniel finally face what he had done. But all I could feel was a heavy sadness for the whole situation. You're right about one thing, I said finally. You have to live with the consequences. But that's not punishment, Daniel. It's just reality. Actions have consequences. Lies eventually come out, and people get hurt when we choose our own comfort over their honesty. Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing my words. Mariana is going to file for divorce. She already told me. And Laura? Laura is in Portugal now. She left 3 days ago. I tried calling, but she blocked my number, so that's it. I lost both. You didn't lose them, I corrected. You pushed them away. There's an important difference in that. We finished our coffees in silence. When we stood up to leave, Daniel held my arm lightly. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry for putting you in the middle of all this involuntarily. You deserved simpler neighbors. I gave a short laugh. That's true. But I think I learned something from this whole situation too. About honesty, about courage, about the consequences of living in lies. I hope it's a lesson you never have to use personally, Daniel said, and there was genuine sincerity in his voice. We parted there, in the market parking lot. I returned to my apartment with a strange feeling of closure. The story was ending, the main characters going their separate ways, each carrying the scars of this impossible situation. That night, for the first time in weeks, the apartment next door was completely silent. There were no arguments, no whispered conversations, no sounds of lives being lived through the thin walls. It was a heavy silence, laden with endings and new beginnings. 2 weeks later, I saw a moving truck parked in front of the building. Daniel was moving out, taking his things to a smaller apartment on the other side of the city. Mariana would stay in the apartment they had shared. She had insisted on that, and Daniel had no arguments to contest it. I helped Mariana load some boxes of Daniel's things, more a symbolic gesture of support than anything. She was stronger now, more resolute, though there were still moments when I saw pain cross her face upon stumbling upon memories of a past that now seemed built on sand. You're going to be okay? I asked as we watched the truck drive away. Eventually, Mariana replied, her voice calm. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. I have my career, my friends, my family, and I have the truth now, which is better than living in a lie, no matter how comfortable it was. She was right, of course. The truth, no matter how painful, was always better than the alternative. It was a lesson we had all learned through this experience. The months that followed brought significant changes for everyone involved. The apartment next door, once full of secrets and whispered lies, gradually transformed into something different, a space of healing and reconstruction. Mariana had thrown herself into work with an intensity that was both inspiring and concerning. Her interior design business flourished. New clients kept appearing, drawn by her impressive portfolio and her new reputation as a dedicated professional. But I knew part of that dedication was escape. While focused on creating beautiful spaces for others, she didn't have to face the emptiness of her own. Are you thinking about dating again? I asked one Saturday afternoon, as we had coffee in her apartment. This had become our routine. Weekends where we got together to talk, watch movies, simply exist side by side without the pressure of pretending we were okay when we weren't. Mariana grimaced. God, no. The idea of trusting someone again, of opening up like that, I can't even imagine. Daniel didn't just break my heart, he broke my ability to believe in people. That's not true, I said gently. You trust me, don't you? She paused, considering. Yes, I do, but it's different. You were the only person honest with me throughout this nightmare. Even when you could have pretended ignorance, you admitted you knew. That means something. It was true. Our friendship had been forged in unusual circumstances, but it was real and solid in a way that surprised us both. Mariana had become more than just the neighbor. She was a genuine friend, someone with whom I could be completely honest. I got a message from Laura, Mariana mentioned casually, stirring her coffee. From Portugal. That surprised me. Really? Are you two in contact? Sporadically, Mariana admitted. I know it sounds strange, but there's something liberating about talking to the other person affected by Daniel's lies. She understands in a way no one else can. And I forgave her, I think. Not immediately, but over time. She was trapped too, just in a different way. How is she? I asked, genuinely curious. Better from what she says. The job in Portugal is going well. She met someone, a colleague architect. Nothing serious yet, but there's potential. She said that for the first time in years, she feels like she can breathe freely, without carrying the weight of an impossible relationship. There was something beautiful in that, I thought. Laura had achieved what she sought, freedom from the chains she had helped forge. It was a different kind of happy ending, but it was an honest restart. And Daniel? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Mariana's face clouded slightly. We don't talk. The lawyers handle everything. The divorce should be finalized next month. I heard through mutual friends that he's not doing well. He lost some important clients at the firm when the story leaked. Apparently keeping a hidden mistress isn't good for a family lawyer's image. He's drinking more than he should. Looks 10 years older. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. Just a persistent sadness for how things had ended. Daniel had destroyed his own life as much as he had destroyed the lives of the women around him. Do you miss him? I asked softly. The man you thought he was? Mariana was silent for a long moment. Yes, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I miss the Daniel I knew, or thought I knew. I miss the plans we made, the future we imagined together. But I realized I was in love with an illusion. The real Daniel, the man capable of lying while looking into my eyes, of maintaining a double life for years. That man I never loved because I never really knew him. It was a powerful distinction. Mariana wasn't just healing from the betrayal. She was healing from the loss of a version of reality that had never truly existed. As for me, the whole experience had changed me in ways I was still processing. I had moved into that apartment seeking a quiet restart after my own turbulent relationship. Instead, I had been thrown into a drama that forced me to confront questions about honesty, loyalty, and moral responsibility that I would have preferred to avoid. But I had also grown. I learned that silence can be complicity, that painful truths are better than comfortable lies, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to do the right thing despite it. One afternoon, 3 months after Daniel moved out, I went for a walk in the nearby park and saw something that made me stop. It was Mariana, sitting on a bench, smiling as she chatted with a man I didn't recognize. It wasn't anything romantic, just two people talking animatedly, perhaps work colleagues or new friends. But seeing Mariana smiling genuinely again, connecting with other people, gave me a sense of hope. She saw me and waved, inviting me to join them. The man was Rodrigo, a client who had become a friend. We talked for half an hour about trivial matters, the weather, design projects, new restaurants in the city. It was wonderfully normal, free from the weight of secrets and lies. As we walked back to the building together, Mariana said to me, "Thank you, Helena, for everything." I didn't do much, I protested. In fact, sometimes I feel guilty for not doing more, for not telling you sooner. You did exactly what needed to be done, Mariana interrupted me. You were honest when I asked. You stayed by my side when my world collapsed. You reminded me that not everyone lies, that not everyone deceives. You were a reminder that kindness and honesty still exist, and that was all I needed. Her words moved me more than I expected. I had spent so much time questioning myself, feeling guilty, wondering if I had made the right choices, that I hadn't considered that maybe, just by being present and honest, I had made a difference. That night, lying in my bed, looking at the wall that separated our apartments, the wall through which I had heard so many secrets, witnessed so much pain, I felt something different. It was no longer a thin barrier between secret worlds. It was just a wall. And on the other side was a friend, rebuilding her life brick by brick, choice by choice. The apartment next door no longer held secrets. The thin walls no longer whispered betrayals. It was just a home, imperfect, but honest, where someone was learning to live again in truth. And that, I realized, was the true happy ending. Not a fairy tale of eternal romance, but the courage to rebuild after devastation, the strength to choose honesty over comfort, and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the end of something bad is the beginning of something better. 1 year after that first night when I heard conversations I shouldn't have, I found myself reflecting on how a simple apartment move had completely altered my perspective on relationships, truth, and human nature. The building had changed too. New neighbors occupied the apartment where Daniel had lived, a young couple with a baby whose nighttime cries were infinitely preferable to the secret-laden whispers I used to hear. The walls remained thin, but now they only transmitted the mundane sounds of normal life. Conversations about bills to pay, arguments about diapers, the comforting noise of a family building their future together. Mariana had transformed completely. Not physically, she was still the same beautiful and elegant woman as always. But there was a solidity to her now, a confidence that came from surviving the worst and emerging stronger. Her business was thriving. She had even given a lecture at an interior design conference, sharing not only her professional expertise, but also, subtly, her personal journey of reconstruction. "You know what I realized?" she said to me one night, as we drank wine on her apartment balcony. "Daniel did me a favor in a way." I looked at her in surprise. "How so?" "He broke the illusion," Mariana explained, her eyes fixed on the city horizon. "I was living in a fantasy, believing in a kind of love that simply doesn't exist. That perfect love, without flaws, where two people are everything to each other. His betrayal forced me to confront reality. And reality, as ugly as it can be sometimes, is where real life happens." "Have you forgiven him?" I asked, curious. Mariana considered the question carefully. "Not in the traditional sense. I don't think he deserves absolution for what he did. But I freed myself from the anger. Because carrying anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Daniel has to live with his choices. I choose to live with mine, and my choice is to move forward." It was profound wisdom, earned through pain and reflection. Mariana wasn't just surviving, she was flourishing in a way that would never have been possible if she had remained in the comfortable lie of her marriage. As for Daniel, I received sporadic news about him. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned he had quit the law firm and opened his own small practice. He was in therapy, apparently working through his issues with honesty and commitment. He wasn't in any relationship, not ready for it, according to what I heard. Part of me wondered if he had learned something from all this, if the pain he caused and experienced had been a catalyst for real change, or if he was just more careful now, better at hiding his flaws. I would probably never know. Our stories had intertwined briefly, but now we were on completely different paths. Laura sent occasional messages to Mariana, and through her I received updates. Portugal had been good for Laura. The relationship with the architect colleague had become serious. She was planning to get married. This time she had written to Mariana with self-deprecating humor, to a man who was completely free and available, without complications or lies. "She invited me to the wedding," Mariana mentioned one day, showing me the message on her phone. "She said she'd understand if I didn't want to go, but she'd like to have me there, that it would be a way to celebrate not just her love, but our overcoming too." "Are you going?" I asked. "I'm thinking about it," Mariana admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? The idea of celebrating the wedding of my ex-husband's former mistress. But there's also something beautiful in it. We both came out from under Daniel's shadow, found our own lights. Maybe it's exactly the kind of closure we both need. Their courage, Laura's in inviting, Mariana's in considering accepting, impressed me deeply. They had transformed a situation of involuntary adversaries into something like allies, connected by the shared experience of loving the wrong man and finding strength to move on. As for me, the whole experience had changed my approach to relationships. I ended my previous relationship because I felt suffocated, trapped in something that wasn't working but afraid to hurt the other person. Now I understood that prolonging something false was crueler than ending it with honesty. When I started dating again, casually without pressure, I carried the lessons from those thin walls with me. I prioritized honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. I confronted problems instead of letting them fester in silence. And most importantly, I trusted my instincts when something felt wrong, instead of convincing myself I was imagining things. One Sunday afternoon, a year and a half after moving into that apartment, Mariana knocked on my door with a bottle of champagne. "The divorce is finalized," she announced, her smile genuine and free. "Officially, legally, completely finalized. I'm free." We celebrated that night, not with sadness for what had ended, but with joy for what was beginning. Mariana had regained not just her freedom, but her identity. She was no longer Daniel's wife or the betrayed woman. She was just Mariana, talented designer, loyal friend, resilient survivor, complete woman in herself. "You know what's funny?" Mariana said, a bit tipsy from the champagne. "If you hadn't moved here, with these ridiculously thin walls, I'd probably still be living in that lie. Daniel would have been more careful, Laura would have kept waiting, and I would have wasted more years of my life in an empty marriage." "I'm not sure I can take credit for that," I laughed. "I just lived here. The thin walls would exist anyway." "But you were here," Mariana insisted. "And when the time came, you chose honesty, even when it was hard, even when it wasn't your responsibility. That matters." Maybe she was right. Maybe my presence, my involuntary testimony, my eventual honesty when confronted, had been necessary pieces in the sequence of events that led to the truth. Or maybe the truth would have emerged anyway. Truths usually do eventually. What I knew for sure was this: those thin walls had taught me something precious. That secrets are heavy and corrosive. That lies, no matter how well-intentioned, end up hurting more than the truth. That real love cannot be built on foundations of deception. And that sometimes, the most unlikely circumstances place us exactly where we need to be to learn what we need to learn. The thin walls of that old apartment were more than an architectural flaw. They were a metaphor for the fragility of the lies we build, for the eventual transparency of truth, for the impossibility of keeping secrets forever. Through them, I heard not just conversations, but life lessons being whispered by the universe. I learned that true love isn't the absence of problems, but the presence of honesty to face them together. That trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only on foundations of absolute truth, not on patches of apologies and empty promises. That courage isn't doing the easy thing, but doing the right thing, even when every fiber of your being screams for you to run. I learned about the complexity of human nature, that good people can do terrible things, that victims and villains are rarely as clearly defined as we'd like, that we all carry the capacity for both kindness and cruelty, and that our choices, not our intentions, define who we really are. Most importantly, I learned about myself, about my own capacity for courage when needed, about my tendency to avoid conflict, even when confrontation is necessary, about my strength, which I didn't know I had until it was tested, about my compassion, which extends even to those who may not necessarily deserve it, because I now understand that we are all flawed humans trying to navigate impossible situations. I moved out of that apartment 6 months ago, ironically not because of the drama, but because I received a promotion that allowed me to buy my own house. It's small, but it's mine, and the walls are wonderfully thick. I hear absolutely nothing from my neighbors. Sometimes, strangely, I miss that involuntary connection, that window into other people's lives that the thin walls provided. But then I remember, I no longer need thin walls to connect with people. I have real friendships now, built not on involuntarily shared secrets, but on conscious choices of vulnerability and honesty. I have Mariana, whose friendship was forged in the fire of the most brutal truth. I even have Laura, with whom I maintain occasional contact, united by the shared experience of witnessing the consequences of dishonesty. And I have my own life, finally lived with eyes wide open. I'm dating again, but this time with a heightened awareness of red flags, of the importance of honest communication, of not ignoring my instincts when something feels wrong. I'm more cautious, perhaps, but also wiser. And when I trust completely, because I consciously chose to do so, not because I simply closed my eyes to signs of trouble. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I reflect on that first night, on how a simple apartment move, an architectural defect of poorly insulated walls, triggered a series of events that permanently changed the course of multiple lives, on how I, a reluctant observer, ended up playing a crucial role in a story I never asked to be part of. And I realized that maybe it's not about the walls at all. Maybe it's about what we choose to do when the truth reveals itself, invited or not. About having the courage to face uncomfortable realities instead of hiding in convenient lies. About recognizing that we all deserve to live authentically, even when authenticity is painful. The story that began with whispered conversations through thin walls ends with this understanding. Truth is liberating, even when it first destroys. Honesty is healing, even when it first hurts. And sometimes, the most important lessons in life come from the most unexpected sources, even from walls that were too thin to keep secrets contained. Mariana found her strength. Laura found her honest restart. Daniel, I hope, found his redemption. And me, I found my voice, my courage, and the understanding that being an inconvenient witness to others' truth teaches us vital lessons about our own lives. As the night progressed and the champagne bottle emptied, Mariana and I made a toast, not to eternal love or fairy tale happy endings, but to truth, to the courage to start over, and to the unexpected friendship forged in the most unlikely circumstances. To thin walls, Mariana toasted with an ironic smile. To thin walls, I repeated, and to the truths they reveal. Because in the end, it wasn't the walls that mattered. It was what we chose to do with what we heard through them. And we, Mariana, Laura, even me, had chosen truth over comfort, honesty over convention, courage over cowardice, and that finally had made us free. Conclusion. Today, 3 years after that fateful first night when I heard conversations that changed everything, I look back with a perspective that only time and distance can provide. The apartment next door is still occupied by the young couple with the baby, who is now a noisy and curious child who occasionally knocks on my door selling cookies for school. The walls remain thin, but the sounds that come through now are of a normal family, with everyday joys and challenges that have nothing secret or destructive about them. Mariana moved out 6 months ago. Not out of necessity, but by choice. She bought a beautiful penthouse in the neighboring neighborhood, a space she designed from scratch, an authentic reflection of who she has become and not of who she thought she should be for someone else. We remain close friends, meeting regularly for dinner, to talk, to simply exist in each other's presence without needing thin walls to connect us. She's dating again. Not anything serious yet, but she's open to the possibility. This time, she told me recently, I'm going in with eyes wide open. I'm not seeking perfection or fairy tales. I'm seeking honesty, compatibility, someone as committed to truth as I am. And if that doesn't exist, I'd rather be alone than live in a lie again. Laura got married in Portugal, and to the surprise of many, but not mine or Mariana's, we were both there. It was a beautiful, small, intimate ceremony with a view of the ocean. There was a strange but powerful moment when Laura, Mariana, and I met on the terrace before the ceremony. 3 women whose lives had intertwined through one man's betrayal, now gathered to celebrate an honest new beginning. Thank you, Laura said to Mariana, tears in her eyes, for forgiving me, for coming, for showing me it's possible to turn something ugly into something meaningful. Thank you to you, Mariana replied, for freeing me. I know it wasn't your intention, but that's what you did. Your tears through those walls that night forced me to wake up to a reality I was avoiding seeing. It was a moment of deep healing for both, witnessed by me, the eternal observer who somehow became an integral part of the story. As for Daniel, I heard from him briefly a few months ago. He called, surprisingly asking for an apology. Not just to me, but apparently he was on an apology tour as part of his therapeutic process. He was engaged, he told me, to someone who knew his whole story and still chose to be with him. I learned, he said, that lies are like cancer. You can cut out the tumor, but you need to treat the whole body or it comes back. I'm treating the whole body now, finally being honest. With her, with myself, with everyone. I don't know if I fully believe in Daniel's transformation. People can change, but real changes are rare and difficult. But I choose to believe that at least he's trying, that the pain he caused and experienced wasn't completely in vain. This story taught me lessons I carry with me every day. It taught me that witnessing others' truth is a responsibility, not just an accident. That silence can be complicity. That honesty, no matter how painful, is always better than comfortable lies. Thank you so much to all our loyal channel followers for your amazing support and for sticking with us through every story and twist. And a huge welcome to all the new viewers just joining us. It's fantastic to see our community growing. If you enjoyed this tale of secrets, thin walls, and hard-won truths, please hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss out on more gripping narratives like this. Your subscription means the world to us. Let's keep the stories coming together. What did you think of Helena's journey? Drop a comment below.